Stefan, I am anxious to see about the top 12 worst Agile Andy patterns here on a Friday. So, Stefan, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here and turn it over to you, my friend.
Oh, first of all, thank you very much for the warm reception. I'm really looking forward to this, and it feels good to be on your home turf, so to speak. So, given some other discussions that you may have on LinkedIn or wherever you choose to fight your trolls. So what are we going to do? First of all, nothing is scripted here, so I'm just bubbling along. So bear with me if some things are not that as polished as they probably could be, but I think it's more fun this way. So what do I like to talk about? I mean, if you've been following me a bit, you know I write a lot about anti-patterns. It is my personal way of learning. So I like this concept of inversion, changing the perspective. And you probably have practiced that too in the past. Have you ever run a pre-mortem, for example? Thinking in advance what might go wrong 6 or 12 months down the road. I believe it's an awesome concept, but not everyone is convinced about that. So, for example, I don't know whether you're listening to the Freakonomics podcast, but they just had an awesome series of 4 pods on the question of how to fail. And in the last episode, there was a founder who said, "My goodness, no, we're not ever going to do run a pre-mortem here. This is depressing. I want people fired up and totally enthusiastic about what we do and just think in good terms." And I thought to myself, "Oh man, this is going to be a long way." Because I believe inversion is an excellent way of learning something. Or think of TRIS, the liberating structure. This magical exercise beloved by any developer I've ever met, where you are allowed to unleash your inner Darth Vader, right? So whenever I run classes, I always have an exercise about this. So for example, how can you sabotage your new Scrum Master? The pitch is always something along the lines of, hey, you're a middle manager in a classic tech company, right? And you believe that Scrum is just one of these fads and will go away. And you simply can accelerate the inevitable by, pushing your first Scrum Master a bit over the edge, But take into consideration, we're not outsourcing the jobs to the local chapter of the Mongols. No, we just apply culturally accepted behavior, right? And then we basically start brainstorming what this could be. And I can tell you, people are very, very creative if they are allowed to be. So it's I believe inversion is a very good idea. And if you're a bit dabbling with investment and you read Charlie Munger, you will also understand that he's a big fan of inversion. You will be pretty good at investing if you just avoid the common traps that all the other people are stepping into. So when did I start with this anti-pattern stuff? That was about 6 years ago or so. I was freelancing at a large utility here in Germany. And so everything was relatively smooth. I mean, no trouble getting invoices or expenses paid, nothing along that. I never killed myself in the process. I had a lot of time, thinking about things and brushing up my understanding of how Agile might work. But whenever I was commuting to them in the Monday mornings, I started taking notes. And those notes turned into blog posts. And I started with a few observations. Then I turned it into something more structured, So I was talking about events and roles and artifacts. And in the end, last year, I thought about maybe you have enough material that this actually could be worth writing a book about. And fortunately, one of the sponsors of Scrum Masters of the Universe, Scrum.org, actually has a program in collaboration with Pearson. And I got accepted. And I said, oh, awesome. I mean, you already have dozens of blog posts. How hard could this be? I can tell you, it was an amazing journey. I spent most of this year actually turning my blog post into something readable that would be acceptable from a traditional publisher. Was like being back in school. This dreaded moment in English class when your paper was returned. You said, I don't like to look. It's all red or something like that. Well, anyway, we made it through it. And one result of this effort actually is these little 12 thingies here that we will have a look at. So what are we talking about? I just randomly picked 12 anti-patterns from the book and thought I might, talk a bit about those and maybe have a few questions and just have a good time, so to speak. So where to start? First of all, this is my belief when it comes to applying agility in whatever form or flavor. It's not about Scrum, Kanban, or whatnot. It's just in general. I do believe it cannot be pushed. You can't roll it out. You can't tell people from now on you're agile. It doesn't work. People need to be convinced that it is beneficial to them at a lot of levels that they now become agile. And I guess you all have already experienced the moment when you figure out that some people on your team that you believe would be excellent at this basically are not interested in becoming agile. It's requires a lot of responsibility. You have to think about the usual 9-to-5 framework, so to speak, and engage yourself significantly more into the whole process. Accept responsibility is really a big thing. So if you like, as an organization, to become agile, it basically requires to get comfortable with a different mindset. Servant leadership, etc., pp, the whole 9 yards, so to speak. Consequently, it will have a changing effect on the culture. Yes, there are always your 10 to 15% refuseniks who are married to the status quo because it's beneficial to them. Maybe they're harboring personal agendas. They invested a lot in their networking, and now you're about to devaluate anything of that. So they're not happy about this. Totally, I get it. I understand. And I don't mind them to feel that way. All I ask is, okay, have an open mind, and just try to engage with what we're offering here. And a third point, at a certain level, you need to descale your organization. And particularly, you have to empower the people closest to the problem to solve it. Now, I don't know whether you've ever read L. David Marquette's Turn the Ship Around, which is an excellent book, and he exactly describes how this works. Intent-based leadership, really awesome. And yet a lot of people struggle with it as a concept, for various reasons. So I think that would be a good idea for at least a long blog post, right? So why does the traditional leadership or the leadership in traditional organizations is so reserved regarding becoming agile? Because the C-level typically is totally in, because most of the time becoming agile is actually a good business decision. It's a sound business decision. Agile companies actually create greater returns for shareholders, for stakeholders, offer better paid jobs and more secure jobs because they are actually leading in competition. This is the whole point. Always like to say we're not getting paid to practice Scrum, but solve our customers' problems within the given constraints while contributing to the bottom line of our organization. If you embrace that idea, a lot of things become easier. Okay, so any questions? Or shall we have a look at my first one? So this is a classic, typical oxymoron, precise estimates. So there is somehow the idea is still floating around that in a complex environment, we can actually predict the future. I always ask myself, okay, dear superior, imagine that your people were so good at their job that they actually could predict what they're going to deliver 3 or 6 months down the road. Do you believe that they would continue working for you? I could think of a ton of different jobs that are significantly better paid than the one they have today, right? So we can't be precise. You know, it's a forecast based or that should be delivered with a timestamp. You know, the date and time, and you should always add a sort of asterisk. You know, and then explain the context that was taken into consideration when making this forecast. You know, based on the following information, we thought that. You know, but all of that is typically skipped, and people just assume that if you make a forecast, you will deliver on time. I mean, the question, when can I have it and how much is it, is completely legitimate. Don't get me wrong. You know, other people need to plan too, particularly if their job is depending on us delivering something. However, it is very, very difficult, and in my experience, practically impossible to actually nail this unless you integrate so much buffer that people believe you're slacking anyway, or you're not serious about your job, right? Yeah, Monte Carlo simulations may work, but there are different issues and problems that you have with that sort of statistical analysis. I know that's opening a whole different can of worms at this point. So precise estimates really doesn't work. However, what is working in my experience is regularly delivering what you promise. You know, build trust and rapport with your stakeholders. Be transparent about it. Avoid being a black box. You know, be open to communicate. That certainly helps. And in my experience, they stop breathing down your neck. You know, imposing arbitrary deadlines or requiring fancy reports. Dogmatism. If you follow some of the conversations that are out there on LinkedIn, for example, a lot of people are really dogmatic about, for example, applying Scrum. You know, and I always ask myself, this is really interesting. How are you doing this? I mean, the whole manual is, I think, 13 pages as a PDF, including cover and back and so on. So there's not a lot of substance in there. It's a deliberately incomplete framework, so you have to augment it anyway. How can you be so sure that this is exactly the way that
Journey.
That Ken and Jeff intended it to be interpreted? So classic issue that we have here, right? Moreover, dogmatism does not help in complex situation. You know, we're applying something that is called empirical process control to actually minimize the risk of running in the wrong direction. And now you want to be dogmatic about it. You know, so that in my world, that really does not work together well. You know, so if you like to solve complex adaptive problems, quit dogmatism. You know, it doesn't help. You know, it's there's no upside of waving the Scrum guide in front of other people. You know, so it's just going to sour the relationship with a lot of people and make life so much more miserable than it actually has to be. Okay, number 3, the oversized product backlog. This is the fun part. Sometimes I'm called to assess the situation in an organization regarding certain teams, and I do some sort of audit. And my first step is always some sort of forensic backlog analysis. So have a look at the backlog and try to understand, okay, what backlog items are in there, and what attributes do they have, and then I start categorizing those. And in my non-representative experience, I come to the conclusion that teams that are not performing at the level that they actually should be able to reach, typically, by all means, suffer from an oversized product backlog. It's way too large. It's not just way too large, it's also of an inferior quality. Meaning there's a lot of empty tickets in there, just a title, nothing else. A lot of tickets that haven't been touched in months. Tickets that document that there are serious discussions about this product backlog item that somehow haven't been solved. So there is a moment when discussions just stop, without resolving the issue here. And I think all of those contribute to the point that teams are not really at their best self. Let me put it this way. So from my perspective, product backlog is really the idea of, okay, for the next 2-3 sprints, for example, how could we best use our time that we have as a team? What is creating most value for customer and organization? And I'm comfortable with maybe 100 entries or so. I have a good understanding of 100 entries, but anything beyond that, I would need to start looking them up. And actually, I would like to avoid that. The more entries you have in your product backlog, the more likely it is that you start to crowd out collaboration. Well, first of all, your stakeholders give up looking at this very early because they have no clue. They have no clue when they look at 100 pieces, and they have even less clue when they look at 460. Secondly, how are you going to work? How are you going to collaborate as a team on your backlog if you have 460 entries? How are you going to order this? I mean, just from a technical perspective, I would be really interested in that. What tool are you using? Is it a large wall, and do you use index cards, or do you have some fancy Jira plugin that is making that work for you? Please share with me. I would be really interested in learning how you handle this kind of product backlogs. So from my perspective, you should be striving for an actionable product backlog that is short and sharp, and maybe covering 2, 3, 4 sprints, depending on what you're working on, no more. So number 4, developers develop. There is this crazy idea among developers and among engineering managers that the job of developers is always to write code. I don't think so. I believe their job is, first of all, to participate in a team-wide action to figure out what is worth working on. And secondly, if you figured out what is valuable to your customers and your organization, realize that with as little code as possible. So from my perspective, they're more the technical problem solvers, contributing to the whole process of product discovery. And I've been always an advocate of including my developers as early as possible in product discovery activities. Okay, those that volunteer, you can't force them to do that, of course. But in my experience, there are many developers who like to talk to their customers directly, observe their customers in their natural habitat, how they're using the software, what problems they have, and who really enjoy doing this. All they need is a bit of education how to do this, a bit of training. And then you can actually actively involve them in the whole process, which is awesome because so much less gets lost in translation, right? So the worst structure is really, in some large organizations, is still happening. If you have to file a request for doing some user research to the UX department, who will 6 weeks later return you some report. and then you're supposed to know what's going on. You always ask yourself, my goodness, this can't be it. But I've been on more than one project where this was actually the case, and I always ask myself, okay, why are we doing this? Why is there a separate department that is doing product discovery? Shouldn't that be a job of everyone on the team? I mean, aren't we all wearing the same jersey here and have the same idea of how to help our customers? That is sometimes a bit more tricky, right? So my tip, involve your developers in user research. Some of them will really, really like this. And they're good at this too, by the way. We know what to do. That's the classic, right? So yeah, you don't have to do any kind of product discovery. It's totally fine. We already know exactly what our customers want. And we can tell you, that's why we write requirement documents. And so don't make such a fuss about it. Just take it and deliver what we ask from you. This is, of course, ludicrous, because it's rarely the case that we actually know what our customers absolutely want. We have to figure that out. It's a process, not a destination. And I think a lot of people are significantly better suited than the stakeholders to figure out what that is, right? So it's always tricky, particularly if you have discussions at the level of you do not tell me how I spend my budget. In the end, I'm funding your team, right? But that's certainly a discussion that you need to have if you want to be successful as a Scrum team, by all means. My goodness, apologies. This looks horrible. Okay, now it's better. So the moment of crisis, and the first thing that comes to your mind of your leadership is to stop the fine weather sailing, called Scrum or whatever you practice, and revert back to the old command and control structures. If there's a crisis, it feels so much better from a leader's perspective that they are in control, right? That they can show they're doing something about it. They have everything. They do everything possible to fix the situation, and it actually reminds them often of the good old times when managers were supposed to know the answer to any questions that you might have, right? Which of course is relatively useless because we can use Scrum in the same capacity to solve problems. Why wouldn't we, right? Scrum is not about fine weather sailing. It's about creating a decision process that allows us to mitigate risk if we do not know what we have to deliver to make our customers happy. This, to me, sounds like a good recipe for dealing with crises. Unfortunately, it's still a rather common occurrence. So, what else? Project management in disguise. Yo, that is always fun, particularly in organizations that consider agile transformations as a sort of printing new business cards. So the project manager is now product owner and basically brings the traditional way of handling issues and making suggestions to the team and expecting that this is going to just continue to work with more enthusiastic team members because they're now agile, right? Of course, this is also a fallacy. It's not going to work this way. There's a reason why we have this sentence in the Scrum Guide telling us that no one tells the developers how to turn product backlog items into increments and how to pick the work to actually accomplish the sprint goal. That is their prerogative because they committed to actually accomplishing the sprint goal. There's a reason for that. It's checks and balances. And a lot of people simply do not understand why this is supposed to work and how it could work. in my experience, it works very well if you stick with the basic rule. So for Scrum, this is really trivial. The product owner brings the business objective for the sprint. The Scrum team collectively then creates a sprint goal. The developers commit to the sprint goal, and in turn pick the work necessary to accomplish the sprint goal. You may have noticed Scrum is a rather egalitarian approach, isn't it? I mean, there are no hierarchies within the team, and no one has any authority to tell anyone else what, when, where, and how to do things. And it's not a bug; it's a feature, and we should simply embrace it. I believe this is the best way to actually get on with that. Okay, number 8, the lonely team. You're working your butt off, but everyone else around you is absolutely not responsive. So I mean, they're not attending your sprint reviews, and they still keep asking for these silly reports by email every single sprint, and they expect still to bring the information to the leadership and not the other way around. And whatever you do, it's not working. We have spent a lot of time in the past on actually overcoming this disinterest of stakeholders in what you're doing as a team. Starting with advertising our sprint reviews, creating newsletters, to invite all the people, putting posters into elevators and replacing them because facility management took them off immediately after we put them up there. So it was always a nice way of, okay, can we put more on than they will rip off, in a given period of time. In one situation, we even started to bribe our stakeholders. So 5 teams, no one was attending our sprint reviews at the beginning, and we thought, okay, how can we deal with that? And we came up with the idea that we handed out small jobs to those stakeholders that attended the sprint reviews. So little bug fix here, small feature polish here and there. So just small stuff, not really affecting our productivity, but as a gesture of goodwill. That was really very successful. So we could stop doing the work after 3 months because everyone was showing up and bringing their jobs they would like us to do. And then we said, okay, now that we have you all here, we can go back to the way it is supposed to be. So you have to sell this. There's no way around. Just because you're excited about, for example, scrumming along, it doesn't mean that everyone else will be excited. Sometimes it requires a bit of persuasion. The need for control. That's has always puzzled me. So managers showing up at your doorstep, like, yeah, I need the minutes from your last retrospectives. And you ask why? Yeah, I'm the manager. I'm supposed to guide you if I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, could you repeat this? Why would you need those? Totally not understanding that team retrospectives are for the team. Las Vegas principle. No one is talking about this. Everything stays in the room. Creating a safe space, and of course, making the minutes only available to team members. So sometimes it takes a bit more than just talking about this, and learning how to say no is really helpful in that respect too, because while you understand that probably managers are eager to help, they also need to learn to understand that there are areas of collaboration and teamwork that are off limits to them, for very good reason. One way that you can actually handle this is offering stakeholder retrospectives and management retrospectives. So in regular intervals, and invite your stakeholders and your managers to a retrospective, and then address their the issues that you have with them and vice versa. That really helps. Okay, of course, you may have noticed come and check them. According to Plutarch, that was the author of Leonidas to the agent of Xerxes when Xerxes was demanding that the Spartans lay down their weapons. You know, maybe you've seen 300. It's part of that too. So of course, it's much cooler in Greek. Now, quality. The original idea of business agility always is, okay, how can we learn faster than the competition and then turn our knowledge into marketable services and products that help our customers have better lives by solving their problems. Now, a lot of people misunderstand the second part of this. You know, it doesn't matter how good you are at figuring out what the next big thing is if you're not capable at the same time to actually deliver. And delivery requires that you have a sound technical basis. And if you're not investing regularly in your technical capabilities, keeping technical debt at bay, regularly refactoring your code base, for example, fixing bugs, etc., pp., this is going to end badly. And I've seen so many teams and organizations fail at this in the course of the time that I really believe it's unbelievably widespread virus going around here. I really can't understand this. Because if you stop spending on the maintenance, it's just a question of time because it will haunt you. And most of the time, it will start haunting you at a moment when you least expect it and actually can afford it. That is my experience. So have really seen a lot of difficult issues here. Startups having to postpone funding rounds, including having a bridge funding was a down round because of technical issues, you know. So and there's so many reasons why this is happening, and most of the time it's happening because somewhere at the leadership level someone is pushing, you know, feature factory syndrome, and the teams are actually not given the opportunity to do their job well. And this comes in a lot of different forms, colors, and sizes, from arbitrary deadline that you have to keep at all costs to just being told not to do this. Now, how often have you worked on something that was labeled a prototype or an MVP, and then you rolled it out and yeah, it was looking good. Okay, this looks decent. Let's now turn this into a real feature, for example. And then someone told you, nah, you know, it's working. Let's move on. You know, competition is moving on too. And you sort of ignored then the necessity of actually lifting your MVP, your prototype, to something that you would say, okay, this is acceptable from a technical point of view. Anyway, not spending time on keeping your definition of done up to date and preserving a high level of technical quality and excellence will cost you dearly. Maybe not immediately, but in the long run. So there is no business agility without technical excellence, by all means. Autonomy. That's a really interesting part. So somehow a lot of organizations have really a hard time understanding how this whole concept of team autonomy is supposed to work in Scrum. You know, what do you mean the team decides when to release something? Could we go back to this idea that the developers decide what they work on and that it's their decision how to work on and deliver this? You know, so it's really interesting to observe that somehow this need for control is so prevalent. I recall a project where we insourced a software application that was previously outsourced, And we delivered in time and budget. So everyone was totally amazed because it was really not happening at that organization. And we also built a very fancy continuous delivery platform into our application. So we could basically deliver at pushing a button as it should be. So we were very proud of that, and we showed that to our stakeholders. And we were building the application for the UK subsidiary, and the governance department in the UK said, "No, you can't do this." I said, "Yes, of course. Look, beat new version out." I said, "No. We have to look at this whether everything is okay." And we were asking, "Okay, what do you mean by okay? Do you recall that we had a joint workshop on creating a definition of done, and that you signed off on this? That you said, yeah, this is it. Yeah, but for whatever legal reasons, we really have to look at this first." So long story short, we ended up with building a staging system exclusively for them. And they were giving notice for a week. And if they didn't come up with any complaints, we would release after the week automatically. And guess what? We never got a single complaint about anything going wrong. All we had was a delay in the process for a whole week. You know, totally insane, but that was the way it was working. Okay, self-management as a lip service. Yeah. There is this idea among a lot of people at the leadership level that you cannot basically trust your workers. You know, if you do not keep them up to tiptoes, if you do not keep them under control, they basically start to slack. You know, do something on the side, run their own side projects, play table football. I don't know how you call it in the States, but you know, gaming around, fooling around, you know, spending your money, and when you actually want them to work for you. And so self-management always works for them to the level that, hey, as long as they deliver what I want them to deliver by the date I set them, it's always fine. I don't care how you call it. Please call it self-management, but I will step in the moment it's no longer working. You know, and yeah. I don't know whether you have ever worked for someone who was really looking at velocity reports, you know, so just to make sure that everyone is occupied, you know, so that the utilization rate is high, but they can tell, hey, utilization rate of the team was 89.2% or 96.3%. And you always ask yourself, okay, why are we doing this? What is the upside of collecting this data? Except that one individual feels better about this. Totally crazy. Which, by the way, is also the reason that I in my Scrum Master classes, I run an exercise that I call cooking the Agile books. So scenarios as follows: you're working for a manager with your team who believes that a good Scrum team increases velocity constantly and regularly. You know, that's a sign for being successful. And I always ask the participants then, okay, now come up with suggestions how you can increase the velocity on paper without actually working more. And you wouldn't believe how creative people are. You know, what you can do. It's really amazing. And we're not talking about just this first grade approach to improving or increasing velocity by just estimating more. You know, there are much more, much fancier techniques that you could do. You know? I really love the one when you claim that you do something manually while you already worked on automation, but no one can see. You know? So, yeah. Anyway. So those were my worst anti-patterns. Precise estimates, dogmatism, the oversized product backlog, developers develop, they're not running user interviews. We know what to do, reverting and crisis, project management in disguise, the lonely team, the need for control, no quality, autonomy, and self-management as a lip service. So if you want to learn more about this, the book is finally making it to the shelves. You won't believe it. So it's supposedly be available in January 2024. And as you can see, I asked a few of our peers to have a look at the draft, and they said, okay, this is really useful, and you can read it, and you learn a lot from that. And maybe I can convince you too to have a look at this. By the way, scrumanti-patterns.com is the website of the book, so you shouldn't be too hard. And I provided Jamie with the PDF of this thing, and there are a lot of links in there. So if you like to join me somewhere, for example, we have a wonderful Slack group that's really, really helpful. A lot of people from around the globe answering patiently a lot of questions, maybe that's something for you too. Okay, that's it from my side.
Stefan, thank you so much. This was incredible. Like all of your articles, just terribly practical. Yeah. So speaking of questions, you've got a litany of questions that are lined up here. So I'm going to hit you with them in rapid fire if that works for you.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Shoot.
All right. So question on anti-pattern number 9.
Yeah.
What if a manager is part of the team and takes stories? How would you handle parsing them out of a retro, or is this an exception as they are part of the team?
Oh my goodness, that is a really bad situation. I had that once. It was horrible. There was a reportee superior relationship in the team, and we basically could not run decent retrospectives any longer from that moment on, because I had to have one-on-ones with the reportee extra without the manager listening in. And it was really helpful because the reportee actually had a very good understanding how the team was failing, or where it was failing, and how the manager contributed to that. So it was a very tricky situation, and we only solved it because the manager in the team was promoted and left the team. There was no fix. We couldn't find one.
Have you ever had a situation where you had this is the manager invited retro, and then we also have here's our real retro?
No, actually not. So we never took it to that level. So faking retro, no, we never did that. But maybe that's a desperate measure, but a measure. We'll give it a try and see if it works.
So next question from Nicole. This one's on anti-pattern number 10. This is coming from Feature Factory Syndrome. How do you convince leadership to allow capacity to ensure quality when they say if we don't deliver, it costs some amount of dollars?
I like this approach that there's a difference between not spending money and saving money. And so I always point to the fact that if they're pushing for utilizing all capacity to churn out new features, they're not spending money, but they're not saving it. Because, by the way, it works. Great. So I found this wonderful picture not long ago somewhere on the internet, and it actually very eloquently describes the situation. If you do not schedule time for maintenance, your equipment will schedule it for you. And this is exactly what happens all the time. It's it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And this is happening always. I've never been in a situation, in such a situation, where this was not haunting you at a certain point in time. You can't avoid it. Sooner or later, you're being flooded with bugs. Customer complaints are up, and delivery times start to get longer and longer. You're spending more of putting gaffer tape around things, to keep them working, until there's a moment when even gaffer tape no longer works. Seriously, I was working for a very well-funded startup, 250 people on the payroll, a highly popular sports app worldwide. tens of millions of users, and was an app-first approach. And there was the moment when they really said, yes, jackpot. They signed a contract that would allow them to broadcast pay-per-view on pay-per-view base sporting events. And the iPhone people had no problem integrating the technology and were ready to go. And the Android folks said, we need a bit more time. Okay, how much? 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 to 9 months? It turned out that they basically neglected updating their tech stack for years. So they've been putting layer upon layer of gaffer tape around it, and now it wasn't possible anymore. They had to rebuild the whole stack, and it was really expensive. I believe. I never saw the numbers, but there was an upcoming funding round. Of course, they were cash flow negative. This was an important milestone, and they didn't want to say, okay, the Android folks cannot participate in that because we were too stupid to actually preserve the quality of our tech stack here.
So Maru asks another question about this same pattern. So see if you have anything to expand upon this. Regarding quality, she says she's curious. She says, any tactics or patterns you know of that can help deal with that? Quality rarely gets defined in products I have seen. And when it gets mentioned, it's super low level technical at best. She mentioned service level agreements.
Yeah, that's more procedural approach to the whole thing. I'm a big fan of having a decent definition of done, and creating those definition of done in a collaborative effort. So it's not just a team effort. Invite your stakeholders. Ideally invite some of your customers too, if they are willing to spend their time with your problems. That would be awesome. And then agree on a regular cadence to actually inspect and adapt their definition of done. With the same people, figuring out, okay, how is this working? Are we at the level that we want to have? If not, where do we have to improve quality to actually reach that level? And then you can have all the difficult questions, actually. Okay, so to what level shall we lift our quality? Is there a level that becomes untenable because it's too expensive? What does quality mean? Okay, typically would say build to spec. What does spec in our market actually mean? So if you have a look at the Toyota, excellent quality, built to spec. Certainly a Rolls-Royce has a better quality, but you have to think about, okay, what kind of product you're building for what kind of market, right? And it's the same here. In my world, I always try to let's have a Toyota. This would always be my inspiration. That's the level I want to have.
So we actually, speaking of Toyota, we have a 2006 Toyota van that we bought when my children were young, and it is still running. And
Yep.
I don't think we've taken it into the shop except for regular maintenance. So I fully agree on quality when it comes to Toyota. All right. So Saruchi asks, Stefan, she says on anti-pattern number 9, she says, is it authentic to conduct overall retrospectives to share organizational level issues to leadership and then conduct sprint retrospectives at the team level for each sprint?
Sure. I came across something that was called meta-level retrospective. I think the wording is not really correct, but it was some sort of it's a stakeholder retrospective retrospective including our stakeholders, where we deliberately talk about the issues that we are seeing, and where we actually have the opportunity to escalate those things that we have no influence on, that are at an organizational level, to the leadership, and say, here, come on, we've identified the following issues, and we need your help to actually deal with those, because we've come to the end on our side as far as means are concerned.
Cool. I see Vishal's hand raised, but we do have one other question in here ahead. And actually, a couple questions, and we're down to the last couple minutes. So I guess we'll take these as quickly as we can. Maru asks, what do you think of eternal, we need sponsorship and support from leadership coming from teams? Can it be an alibi? Open question, interested in Stefan's stories and opinions.
I interpret it, my goodness, I interpret the question as sort of excuse that things are probably not working as well as they're supposed to be working because there's a lack of sponsorship. Yeah, of course, it's convenient. I mean, it's a fallback position. You know, when something is going on, yeah, it's a lack of support from the leadership. Very rather common in my experience. The question is whether the team actually tried to secure the support from the leadership level before, and what they have done. And you know, it's a hard business to get your members from the leadership level to support your team at a tactical level. And you can't expect them that they will join you with enthusiasm because they have so much else on their plate. So it's a more tedious job, and it takes time, and it's little step forward in my experience. But typically, you make progress. You know? So particularly if it comes to ideas of failure culture, for example, you know, in my experience, if you ask for things that are not budget relevant, it's much easier to get their attention than if you ask, "Hey, we need $5,000 for a new whiteboard" or something like that. You know, so this is probably not the right approach. What they always like is something like, "Hey, can we have a failure night or something like that? So we share our failures that we had in the past on different projects or something like that, and what we learned from them." And if they're comfortable with the way your team is working, you often have leaders showing up and actually sharing, "Okay, I failed too. I failed a lot in my past," right? And who hasn't, right?
All right, let's see if we can get these. We're out of time, but really quick. Anchor asks how to convince absolutely everyone that velocity is not the measure of productivity.
Oh, I think it depends on your industry, on your company culture. There will always be some diehard protagonists of productivity, you know, that they were socialized, you know, professionally socialized in this idea of, okay, your job is to increase productivity. And they sometimes find it very hard to understand that in our industry, you know, we are going to places where no one has ever been before. It's not about being more productive in the sense of churning out more code or something like that, more user stories, more features. You know, they're completely useless because we don't know what is creating value. I mean, if you assemble a refrigerator and assume that your company has a brand that is sought after in the market, you will be able to sell the additional refrigerator, and that makes extra money, so everyone is fine. In our case, there is this logic does not apply.
Cool. Well, we still have a couple questions that are left, and Vishal's had his hand raised, but unfortunately we're over time. So Stefan, thank you so much for joining us in this awesome session. So let me ask you, if people do have questions, can they reach out to you? And
Absolutely. Yeah, sure.
and what's the best way to reach out to you with additional
Email
questions?
So, email is by all
Email.
means the best way.
Okay. And you've got your
So
email address listed somewhere?
you can Google me, there's no problem. So Stefan at ageofproduct.com, for example, works well. So no problem. Just send me an email, and I try to be as responsive as possible.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you again. This has been a great session. We appreciate everybody attending and hope everyone has a wonderful weekend.
Thanks a lot for having me.
We'll see you next time. Thanks,
Bye.
Stefan.
Thank you.